Welcome to another edition of Sounding Board. Nick, so the other day you mentioned that you wanted to go through the Tory manifesto.
Yes.
So,
although I don't really want to, read it.
well,
Cover to
so
cover.
that was my question. Have you read it?
I've seen the odd, screenshot of some of the pages, and I've seen quotes and things from it. But based on that, I can't bring myself to actually read it.
It's a good job that I have then. I've been through.
Have you been through all of them?
So I haven't read them all cover to. I mean, it's really difficult to read them cover to cover because they're just awful documents.
The Brexit Party one is quite short.
So I've been through. Okay, I haven't been through all of them. What's the
they called that something, didn't they? They called it their contract or something.
Yeah, what's the Welsh one? I haven't read the Welsh one.
I think it starts with.
So is that right? I haven't read that.
Right.
I haven't bothered with the SNP one.
Right.
I've written notes about the main one. So Tory, Labour, Lib Dem, Brexit, and Green.
Greens, of course, yeah.
So
they've only just released theirs, I think, haven't they?
Yeah,
it's taken a couple of weeks. We're kind of a couple of weeks out now from the actual election, the actual day, and it's taken a good kind of couple of weeks, hasn't it, for them all to release them and make their announcements.
Yeah. So I've gone through and I've just noted what I think are significant things.
Right. So this isn't a good list and a bad list specifically.
No. This is just things
notable
that jumped out, and it's stuff that I've. So lots of this I've read on, on the BBC, on Twitter. So I knew a fair amount about each of them beforehand. But this is So I don't know if we just want to go through a few of the significant things. One thing I will point out, because I was flicking between them.
Were you kind of comparing?
Yeah, I was comparing, and I was just kind of I'd get bored of the Tory one, so I'd have a look at the Labour one.
Yeah.
And I'd be noting down, and then I'd be trying to think back to a policy. Like I'd be looking at the Greens, and I'd be thinking, oh, that's similar to that policy, but I couldn't remember if that was like a Labour or a Tory policy.
Well,
because they are all based. So the Tory manifesto, could have been Tony Blair's manifesto 20 years ago, and nobody would have batted an eyelid. It's
what was I saying last time? Yeah, to Blair and all that. I mean, you mentioned the Green Party there and comparing policies.
Greens are awful.
Yeah, but haven't the other parties just basically copied the Green bits of the Green manifesto anyway?
They're not as extreme.
But isn't that just the date by which we're carbon zero or neutral or whatever?
Yeah, mainly, and there are another couple of other.
I hate even using the phrase because it gives it credence. The problem with even maligning carbon, because it's not even carbon dioxide, it's carbon. We are made of carbon. But yeah, apparently we need to be carbon zero or carbon neutral, whatever that means. That does actually remind me, before you go on with it, that Boris made a great gag. Great gag. What was it? It was carbon neutral. The problem was it starts with this bit about the green bit. Carbon neutral by 2050, Corbyn neutral by Christmas. I can't believe no one's thought of Corbyn neutral. I mean, that is funny.
Yeah, genius. Anyway, I've got a few. I'm gonna rip through these, but I've got a few things that kind of each party has been talking about and specifically mentioned in the manifesto. So, I mean, the Tory manifesto it talks about like unleashing this and unlocking that and supporting and investing, and it just
right.
Sounds
This unleashing and unlocking isn't the market, is it?
No.
The things that they should be unlocking.
No. So the sorts of things they're mentioning under this is there are going to be 50,000 nurses.
Yeah. New nurses, additional nurses.
Additional nurses and 20,000 additional police officers.
He can't stop saying that, can he? Everywhere he goes.
But they're calling it like the NHS People's Plan or the People Plan. It's straight out of the mouth.
Right. Do you know that does ring a bell? Wasn't he talking about even though the Labour Party have got their nationalising broadband thing, which I mean I could talk about for hours being in the industry. But hasn't Boris been calling it the people's broadband or something, or people's net?
I'm not sure, but yeah,
it's not the only time this people's thing has cropped up.
No. But the Tories are using now the NHS People Plan.
I wrote a whole blog post on using people's before anything because you've got people's vote and the People's Republic of North Korea.
People's Palace, of course. But anyway, next is leaving the EU in January. So we can kind of support that.
In January, by the end of January.
Well, I think it said in January, so it means by the end of. It must mean by the end.
So I suppose it's because this is if you class the Brexit Party as a major party, if you class the Green Party as a major party, of all of the major parties, it is only the Brexit Party and the Conservative Party that are pledging to leave.
Yeah.
One assumes the Brexit Party one pledges to leave.
So there are a couple of reasonably conservative, and I don't mean classical liberal, I mean kind of conservative policies. So
right. Do you mean right wing, or do you mean?
Yeah, kind of soft right, I guess.
Yeah.
So no more income tax, VAT, or national insurance, or no additions to those.
Oh, if only no more.
Yeah, not no more. No more increases.
That would make me vote for them.
No more increases.
But that's when you just increase the other ones, isn't it? Though.
Of course.
You make the commitment to do that. It's headline grabbing, no VAT increase. But then it's just do it by the back door somewhere else.
Well, yeah. So there's a pensions rise of at least 2.5% each year on the state pension.
Right.
You're not going to have to sell your home for social care.
Not like last time.
No, not like last time. They've learned a lesson. Zero carbon by 2050. I mean, they've all got these awful green policies.
Right. So you've looked at these. Is the Conservative Party one worse than the others? Have they gone?
No. This is the best you could hope for.
Right. And is that just the date by which we're carbon neutral?
Yeah, I mean they put other things about the environment.
Albeit Jo Swinson doesn't even know what her date is. It's 2045 in the manifesto, which is 2050 today.
We'll come to that. But yeah, so they talk a lot about the environment. They don't go into specifics in as much detail as the Green Party.
Oh no, but they've invented a new quango. I tweeted about this. One of their big green things is a whole new quango.
Okay, brilliant.
On monitoring how carbon we are, or whatever.
Yeah, there's another one.
There you go. I'm going to turn it to a verb.
There's another one, another quango down here. So they're going to spend 6.3 billion on houses, another 2.2 million homes apparently. Right. They want a points-based immigration system, and we've been talking about that for ages.
I think you mean an Australian points-based immigration system.
Similar to the Australian one. They want a new rail line between Manchester and Leeds.
Right now.
So they did talk about HS2, but they didn't commit to anything. They just said we will assess it and we will do whatever's best. Which is,
I mean, isn't that fantastic for a manifesto to say
we don't know what we're going to do?
No, we'll do what we want to do. You vote us in, and we'll do what we want to do. That's what it says.
I mean,
we don't want you to have the decision. We want us to have the decision, but we're not going to tell you what that decision is. We're going to wait until we voted in before we tell you what our decision is, even though we know right now what we're going to do. That's what it is.
Am I being cynical? Oh, no, it's probably the most honest bit of the manifesto.
But you didn't interpret it like that just then.
No, but I generally don't know if they know what they want.
Right. Okay. Right. So I did hear on railways. I did hear that they were looking at opening up loads of lines that got closed in the beaching closures.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. 60s and
and
all the branch lines.
And it's a huge amount. There are disused train lines, bearing in mind that they're already, cutting through places already. That would be obviously it would be far easier to bring back in. To his credit, Miliband had a few of these ideas back in the day when he was leader. I think as something that was an alternative to HS2. Think how much you could spend here, and you wouldn't have to do compulsory purchases. You wouldn't have to carve through the countryside because we already have.
Did you hear about Top Gear's alternative to HS2?
No.
So they worked it out that it would be cheaper to give every commuter between Birmingham and London a brand new M3 because it costs so much.
That's crazy, isn't it?
We'll give everyone BMW M3s, and that would be cheaper than HS2.
That's crazy, isn't it? But you see, I think it's worth remembering that railways were not a public thing. And albeit we've had the privatisation of the 80s under Thatcher.
But that was only after they were nationalised and they just dropped off a cliff.
No, agreed. But I'm saying it was only really part privatisation because it's privatisation as much as the Openreach bit of BT was privatised. It's still they spun off a state monopoly, which is not the same thing. And
they still have control of Network Rail, and they have all they
but
control
again,
the franchises.
there is what exactly they control the franchises. They set all the terms, and the government is notoriously bad at contractual terms. That's why they didn't write down the social contract. Not least of which that means we couldn't take it to court. But they're no good at terms.
Well, think of the line that I travelled to London on. The kind of the north
East Coast main line.
Yeah, so it was when I started it was GNER, and then it moved to National Express. But it was they created a subsidiary called National Express East Coast. So that when they just dropped the keys back because they weren't making any money.
That's right.
They didn't lose out, so it got effectively got nationalised again. Then it went to Virgin. Nationalised again. They're awful, absolutely awful.
But you see, I remember seeing the point I was making, and the reason I compared it to Openreach with the broadband network, cables in the ground, is that Network Rail, or whatever Rail Track were they, or whatever organisations we're talking about here. Again, it's just one organisation that owns the railways. And then the rail operators, the ones that operate the trains on the tracks, and it's absurd, isn't it? And I remember Richard Branson saying around the time when they were, basically handing Virgin the East Coast Main Line bit back, and it becoming our the people's LNER, that he was saying if we could be allowed to be responsible for the tracks that our trains run on, then I could, make a better service. But of course you could. If the repairs are being prioritised between, between this bit and somewhere in Birmingham, then how can you have any control over whether your trains are on time?
It's ridiculous. Moving to another form of transport. So, what's the one thing statists always, the one stupid question that statists always ask you when you talk about libertarianism or whatever?
There's only one.
What's the main one? When you talk about like abolishing the government or private property everywhere, what's the one?
Oh, well, it's who's going to build the roads.
Yeah, well there you go. So,
right, okay.
So there's 29 billion on roads.
Right, okay.
But this is
it's always who builds the roads.
So this is
people who build the roads now.
But this is one for the statists. There's a specific pot.
Oh, potholes. A pot of potholes. The pothole pot.
2 billion.
2 billion pounds.
£2 billion is required.
The pothole pot.
Just to fill in potholes. That's how good they are at building these roads, you morons. 2 billion.
Can I take it back then about the ones who are building roads?
Crazy. So there are a couple of things that stood out. There's another quango. There's the Democracy Commission.
You're joking. Hang on, you're still on the Conservative one.
There you go. There's a Democracy Commission.
But there's an Election Commission. Is that what they call it? No, the Electoral Commission.
You can't have enough commissions, Nick.
Right, but what's the difference between the Electoral Commission and the Democracy Commission? God, the Democracy Commission. I mean, that sounds proper Marxist the way you laid it out.
I can't.
You don't even know.
Well, because I've read like 5 manifestos this afternoon.
Right. So none of the other ones have got a proposed Democracy Commission.
I don't think so. No. This was it? I think it was looking into.
Is this to uphold the results of referenda? Maybe.
I think it was around. It's definitely around the EU, and I think it was around. The court's remit and the things that Parliament can do.
Oh,
all the finagling that the Remainers did. It's looking into that.
Right.
I'm sure, it's looking into that. So
is this right? You say quango, but is this like a royal commission? Is this something that's going to report back and say the Supreme Court needs to be put back in the laws?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is about curbing judicial review.
Probably.
Because of the daft rulings that we've had in the right. Okay. So I am broadly in favour of making changes to that. you know.
Are you going to go all Brendan O'Neill on me? And democracy is amazing, and we need to cherish it, and we need to.
Good God, no. But
he's got his article again, isn't he, about this? The next I guarantee the next few days.
Oh, I see. Yeah, there'll be one.
Write his article, but it'll be around this.
Yeah, bless him. No, it's more the
I do love Brendan O'Neill, but he does write the same article again and again.
Yeah. That to me, democracy is his Achilles heel. I mean, he loves to bash people over the head with it.
Not Marxism.
That's just a ploy.
Do you think
to get
it's
on
just
the
trolling?
TV.
Do you think it's trolling people?
No, it's just use it to get gigs.
Okay, fair play.
I'm a Marxist, and the BBC go, of course you are. But what were we talking about?
We're talking about the Democracy Commission.
But yes, it's more. It's not the democracy bits. It's the judgy bits. It's like I believe that even if we were to manage to shrink the state to like this, that there would still be a role for some form of judiciary, even if it wasn't any more appointed by a state. And at the moment, the relationship between the executive and in fact, speaking of Brendan O'Neill, I think he had David Starkey on.
He did, yeah,
talking about this, and Carswell's had him on recently as well. But I think it was Brendan O'Neill, and I think he went into it the best because obviously Dave Starkey knows his stuff, he knows the history, and all of these Blair, reforms have conspired to give us a situation that gave us some of the nonsense we've had in the last 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about that in some of the manifestos as well. And just two more things that stood out. They're getting rid of the Fixed Term Parliament Act.
Well, yeah, I mean, but wasn't it in the last one, that they won on 2017?
Yeah, but they didn't win in 2017.
Yeah, but they had a confidence and supply agreement with the DUP. The first thing they should have done is repeal. Yeah,
they're too busy fanning around with not doing Brexit.
Yeah, and we need a new word for that because
fanning around,
always. But using the term Brexit to define this period, because we are still pre-Brexit.
Yeah, I meant dealing with.
No, I agree, and you said it, but you had to say we don't have it. People equate it with Brexit. People say Brexit. Oh, we're dealing with Brexit, and to me, that's not what we're doing right now. We're still trying to leave, and obviously it suits Remainers and Revokers.
Yes, I was referring to the process as opposed to the period. I don't regard this period as Brexit, but the process of leaving.
But it's how it's labelled, isn't it? It's how it's labelled. Despite Brexit. Yeah, it's how it's labelled. You haven't actually Brexited. Okay, let's turn it into a verb. To Brexit or not to Brexit? That is the question.
And the final one is that, again, and they should have done this years ago, boundary review.
But, right, okay, so at least I know the history on this one is, and again, we're talking 10 years out of date now. I mean, I think they've reviewed it.
This is another one of Nick Clegg's.
It was. And so the only reason the boundary review did happen, but the only reason it didn't get implemented was because of the coalition. But
2015.
But then there was I know, but you're right. This is all David Cameron's fault. I mean, obviously. But and again, you can look back at the history of the referendum and the supposed renegotiation that kind of never was with the EU. He decided to try and get Brexit done, or at least get the referendum done early in the Parliament, didn't he? And he thought, well, I've plenty of times. We'll remain. I'll do a boundary review. I'll repeal the Fixed Term Parliaments Act in time for me to then go. Now it's time for another election, and that was his plan, wasn't it? Whereas he should have done all that stuff in the complete opposite order. Yeah.
So that's the Tory manifesto. I mean, there's.
Right, is there anything? You mentioned not raising, which I don't think is the same as cutting. I mean, are there any tax cuts in? My understanding from the headlines is that the state still gets bigger.
Of course.
Under the Tories.
Of course, it's a socialist manifesto.
Yeah.
It's not quite Mao's socialist manifesto.
No.
But it's not a conservative manifesto, and it is possibly the best of a bad bunch. That's
in terms of comparing it with previous recent conservative manifestos.
No, comparing with all these manifestos.
Right. So you're in least worst territory here.
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, that's democracy, isn't it? We'll talk about that.
It is, but it's not. Normally the Conservatives are obviously least worst, but they're not as bad as this. This is particularly bad.
So I've heard this characterised as a kind of play it safe manifesto.
Yeah, but I think it's so that they don't.
In that it's not screaming any more quintessential Tory policies of tax cuts or liberalisation or something that they used to do in the past.
But the sorts of people they're trying to appease, like all this carbon neutral rubbish, those people are never going to go vote Conservative anyway. So
I think
why bother?
The point at which I decided not to read the Conservative manifesto was when seeing the double page of the green stuff, and I just went straight to the bit where the words climate emergency were used. And I was just, there was a point there. I was just like, and now I'm done.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Green Manifesto is awful. I mean, I can't imagine.
But the Conservatives are saying there is a climate emergency.
Everybody is.
Yeah, but the Conservatives are the last bastions of hope.
No, not anymore. There are none. So moving on, do you want to go Labour?
Go on then.
Labour next. So there's an NHS increase of 4.3% per year.
I mean, these announcements, they've been much more headline grabbing over the last couple of weeks. I mean, the broadband stuff actually made quite a big splash, didn't it?
Coming on to that.
But I'm saying just Tories say something, and actually they've been trailing the extra police and nurses and all that kind of stuff for ages. That was a bolt from the blue, wasn't it? Was free broadband for all. That was not expected. I think everyone would have been more, or rather less surprised if it had been the complete nationalisation of all the energy companies or whatever. But is that But
of course that's already in there.
That's already in here. Yeah. But yeah, they're making bigger headlines, I suppose.
Well, they're just trying to outspend everybody as well.
It's and I've seen the Sky graphs where they put it on they love standing in front of the big screens, don't they, on Sky News, Sky Views, and they got like a bar like this of 83 billion. The Tories, they are spending, but they're spending less.
They want to cut private enterprise in the NHS as well,
which is at about 5 or 10% or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's about 10%. I mean, it was.
Define it for me. Well,
that's my thing. Does that mean
who makes the surgical gloves? It's not a company that's owned by the government, is it? I mean, who makes an MRI machine? I mean,
I think they mean the people working in the NHS.
But it's daft, isn't it?
It is, and also there was more private enterprise created in the NHS under
PFIs
than under the Conservatives.
Talking like PFI type stuff.
Second Brexit.
Yeah, but they're Tories as far as this current crop are concerned. They were Tory years, weren't they? Tony Blair was a Tory.
Certainly compared to this manifesto, and he's a modern Tory if you compare him to this manifesto.
Yes.
So everyone's moving.
Either Blair is a Boris type Tory or vice versa.
Yeah. Second Brexit referendum, obviously.
Well, then this is the renegotiation of the deal he won't support, or in fact he'll be neutral on.
We don't know whether he's going to support it or not.
No, he's going to be neutral on it. He's going to negotiate a deal that no one wants in his party.
Yeah, it's so bonkers. I mean, why would they even give him a deal?
Boris was role playing this today on camera. He was pretending to be Barnier and then pretending to be Corbyn in response.
I can't imagine how they'd ever get a deal. I mean, it's all I hope they never get in.
Nonsense.
£10 minimum wage.
Does that mean you hope the others get in?
Up from I don't want anyone to get in. I want Guy Fawkes to get in. So there's a £10 minimum wage, up from £8.21. This is for 16-year-olds and up.
So because they're making it universal,
yeah,
or at least there's no banding anymore with the ages. I bet there's a minimum wage increase in the Conservative one, though, isn't there?
There could be. I think there was, but it was in years to come.
But at the same time, another quango, the Low Pay Commission was created in order to set the minimum wage to, I'm assuming, I'm not quoting here, but, you know, to take it out of the political sphere. This is a classic thing, isn't it? And it's thick of it style, isn't it? Mm. It's announcing a quango so that you can make it independent of government. And the Low Pay Commission is supposed to set the minimum wage, and now they haven't set the minimum wage. They've got nothing to do. I mean, they're obviously still there, you know, beavering away, coming up with nonsense numbers. But what's the point of the Low Pay Commission if every time there's a general election, the parties fight over how high to make?
I think we could probably have this argument about every quango.
Yes.
They want to stop state pension age rises.
Oh, right. So we're going to get older, but we're going to spend more and more of our time retired.
Yes.
And being funded by everyone else who's working.
By your kids and their kids and.
Yes.
Yeah. There's going to be a national care service.
Right. So actually, just taking the care bit aside here, national something service. How many of them are there that they're going to add? Because
I'm not sure.
They called it the National Broadband Service. That's the name of the thing they call it. National Care Service.
Yeah.
They just want a national everything service. And I think the only word that they would use instead of national is people's, if they had their choice.
Zero carbon. But so it talks about ending carbon within the 2030s. So you can kind of extrapolate that in
2039.
Yeah, the end. And so we by 2040.
Right.
I don't think they make any firm commitments to that, so that's their aim. So it's worse than it's worse than the Tories. It's, you know, phasing stuff out.
Woollier but earlier.
Yes. They want to nationalise all the things, everything. So we've got the big six energy companies.
Yeah.
Nationalised.
Water.
The national grid
will become the nationalised grid.
Water, yes, correct. Royal Mail,
right.
Again, railways. I just want to nationalise all those, and of course your favourite, broadband.
Don't get me started. To be fair, I had more views, more reactions, and more comments on my LinkedIn post on that, and I prefaced
because presumably a lot of people who you're linked in with work in the broadband
business owners and professionals within the technology space. So it's not even just that I'm connecting with people who are in the comms or the telecoms industry, but tech and IT specifically, more generally, and so they all understand how this works. But yeah, I did this whole LinkedIn isn't the place for politics, but I can't not say anything about this. Yeah. But again, I think I kept it pretty neutral in terms of not saying do or don't vote for anyone. But what I did say was, this is crazy, and if anyone wants to ask me why and put any question to me at all, I am here to answer anything. And actually, there was very little in the way of questions. The vast majority of people were just spouting how nonsensical it was.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Hannon had the best line of thought when he said, "You think broadband is expensive now? Wait until it's free."
Yeah, these are easy throwaway lines, I suppose. But it's after a couple of days. Excuse me.
But think about the government's making cars, you know, the railways, and they're just
totally. But then, actually, when you start thinking of the knock-on effects, you know, forget that it would be a poor service. Forget that it would be slow and never delivered. How about privacy?
Just the fact that they're controlling. That's something like China or Iran. You'd expect them to do, and not Great Britain.
Or Vietnam with their anti-dissent, you know, legislation.
Yes, it doesn't work. You know,
but the knock-on effect of business, let alone the destruction of an entire industry. And the people who don't understand how this works just don't get it. But it's not as simple as saying, well, that's it. If we just nationalise BT, then everything will be fine. People sell broadband and broadband-related products, and more frankly, what's next? When you get to that, as I say, let alone the fact that they're spying on all your stuff.
Yeah, and they can just turn your internet down if they don't like what you're saying, and all sorts. So we're going to scrap universal credit, but they don't like that.
What are they going to replace it with?
To be honest, I was just skimming through it at this stage.
So I mean, that could be just a rebranding exercise. Well, having said that, I think I am surprised that the Labour Party didn't come out, and I'll be intrigued to know whether there's any mention of this in the Green Manifesto, because the Green Manifesto is a throwaway document. Obviously, they know, and everyone in the country, every Green voter knows that they never have to implement anything that is in there.
A bit like the Labour manifesto.
Well, I hope this time that's it. But universal basic income is what I thought, genuinely thought, would be in the Labour manifesto.
I think that's in one of them. Yeah, okay, we'll come to that.
Right, but that's a very.
It may have been. It may have been in the Labour manifesto. I mean, honestly,
Right.
I didn't have much time.
Yeah, sure.
To flick through these.
Yeah.
So they're abolishing the charitable status of private schools.
Of course.
Because they've been talking about it for a while.
Tax private schools, yeah.
Free buses for the under 25s. This is a give away.
Free buses for the under 25s.
Well, they're not going to give them buses. They will be bus journeys, presumably.
Oh, what a great policy that would be. Just in general, what about a 24-year-old? Needs a free bus service that a 26-year-old doesn't need? I'm asking you to think like them. I know that's difficult. But why 25?
Because it's got to be an arbitrary line somewhere, and 25 is as good as any. You don't expect these to make sense. It's
trying.
It's giving them something for the next manifesto where it can be
30
buses for everybody. People's buses.
25.
Right to remain for EU nationals.
Right.
But that's reasonable. I thought. That's like one of the only things I could pick out.
I see. This was your attempt at. Yeah. No, I'm thinking that's not really much of a policy.
No. I'm
not saying I don't support it.
Yeah, literally the only thing I could fit out of the whole manifesto, and 100,000 council houses per year they want to build.
Council houses.
Well, yeah.
Because let's be clear, they don't. Councils make these many houses.
Yeah, no, they actually want to build them themselves.
Yeah, which is different, and so the infrastructure doesn't exist to do that.
That doesn't bother them. None of this.
I know.
It makes sense from a spending point of view.
But if they were to say housing associations are going to make 100,000 more homes.
Yeah, I don't think that's.
No, they haven't. No, I know they haven't. That's one of those ones I do know that it's very specifically council homes, because councils haven't made homes for a long time. Because again, you can argue that the creation of and the status of housing associations, and I know this because I used to work for one, is that kind of, it's a bit Quango-ish. It's not government, but it acts a bit like government. It's obviously funded by government, but it isn't a council. It's as private as you get these days of something like that.
Yeah, no.
And if they were to build them, if they were to say you have more money, then by infrastructure I mean they've got the project managers and the planners and the developers ready to go. Councils don't.
Yeah, they haven't thought through.
We won't worry about that.
So, Lib Dem manifesto.
Lib Dems, another document that you can put anything you like in, unless it's 2010, in which case some of it does get through.
Yeah, I mean, I hope none of this gets in.
But there's no chance anymore of a conservative Lib Dem coalition.
No, but there could be a Labour Lib Dem SNP coalition.
Do you mean a coalition of chaos?
That's what they called it, or that's what they were talking about in 2010, wasn't it? Or was it
2015? That was the and then you've got
the government of all losers. And
but you had. Do you remember the billboard of Sturgeon? No, it wasn't. This is before Sturgeon, was it? Who was leader at the time? No, it was. It was Sturgeon with Ed Miliband in.
Yeah, because I've seen ones recently with Corbyn and
exactly. Yeah. It's a great metaphor.
So they're obviously the biggest thing they're shouting about is they're just going to revoke Article 50 straight away.
Yeah.
It's like end Brexit. That's it.
Yeah.
They're going to increase income tax. They're talking about it, just a penny on the pound.
Are they seriously using that phrase?
Yeah,
Please tell me they are. That's okay, but this is classic Lib Demism.
I mean, they were doing that in like the '92 election. I remember seeing.
I remember you and I watching a debate of the potential chancellors in the 90s.
Yeah, and who was? I remember seeing a party political broadcast from the Lib Dems, and it was.
But this before we had leaders' debates.
Yeah, I can't remember.
There were chancellor debates.
I can't remember the guy's name, but he
I
was.
remember with a penny on the pound for education. And
Yeah.
a penny on the pound for fill in the blank this time round.
But they reckon they can get
£7
£7 billion a year out of that.
Out of just a penny on the pound.
Just a penny on the pound. That's for the NHS. It's for the NHS this time. Education's fine. For the NHS. They've got a free childcare policy of 35 hours a week for 48 weeks, I believe, for if you've got a kid between the ages of 2 and 4.
Right, that's not much change from now.
They want to get to 80% renewable energy by 2030. They're going to tax frequent flyers.
Oh right, this is all their greedy stuff.
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Right, okay.
So
that's all right. But did you hear the good news this week?
Is this actual good news, or are you trolling me?
No, this is good. This is good news. I mean, the green movement think it'll be good news, obviously, because there's less travelling involved. But Coldplay aren't going to tour anymore. Good news.
Yeah, okay. So there is one positive out of
every
the
cloud
climate emergency. An extra 20,000 teachers, which I think will cost 10.6 billion per year.
Right.
They're going to freeze train fares.
20,000 teachers, that was
20,000 teachers.
Okay.
Yeah. A 20% rise on the minimum wage for people on 0-hour contracts.
Right. That's quite specific.
Yeah,
rather than the age bands and everything. Surely the minimum wage for those is the minimum wage for them. What?
If you're on a zero,
unpick that for a second.
If you're
on a 0-hour contract,
the minimum wage is greater to compensate for you being on a 0-hour contract.
20%.
Yeah.
Let's just let that sink in for a moment. 20%.
So it would be like £12 or whatever.
Yeah, compared to the same person doing the same job but for fixed hours.
Which
I'm not saying that someone
banning 0-hour contracts.
Yeah,
it's just a massive.
Look, let's be clear. My problem is the mandatory nature of it. It's the fact that they have to do it rather than the market. So.
You could say that about every single policy, every manifesto. They want to take in 10,000 refugees per year.
Can they all go in Yvette Cooper's house? Has she taken any in
She
yet?
should take at least one.
Has she taken any in yet?
I don't think so.
Okay. Any refugees, or just Syrian refugees?
I think it was just refugees.
Okay.
It's not as easy as you think to take them in. So Julie and I looked into it.
Right.
So we fostered children for a while.
Yeah.
Had a few.
So you've been vetted.
A few pregnant teenagers. Well, we were kind of vetted to the point of adopting. Adoption. Which again, that takes us a year's worth.
Huge amount
of bureaucracy.
Well, I had to be interviewed for that.
Yeah, of course you did. And then we had some issues with not with the kids. Social services were just awful, and the decisions they were making that were affecting the kids was awful, and we just kind of had enough for a while.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, we've got a reasonably big house with a spare room and what have you. What else could we do? So we registered to take in.
So there is like a system
of migrants and stuff, but we were on it for. I'm not sure if we're still on it, but they basically have to sort of ring you up or whatever and say, "Oh, can you take this person?" But apparently they're not all migrants. So we had someone who just let his visa expire, and they said, "Oh, can you take this person in a couple of days or this weekend?"
Right.
He's let his visa expired.
Pending what?
He'd been here for 10 years or something, and had just let whatever it was expire. But we were on holiday, so we couldn't do it.
But do you see what I'm getting at here? Like, pending him filling out a form and getting a new visa, or pending him being deported, or
who knows?
But because you see that just has the ring of we'll get people to use their homes as detention centres.
It's close to that, I guess.
Yeah.
So we were hoping to do it, and obviously that's our situation.
When was this interesting?
Sorry.
When was this that you kind of? Because I'm just thinking migrant crisis 2015.
Yeah, it was after that. It was probably 2016, 2017 maybe.
Okay.
But the plan was, so we have to be a bit careful with my wife because she's got brittle bones, she's a wheelchair user, didn't really want adult men,
Totally.
Being completely honest. But we thought, if there's like a young mother and a child, for example, then we could house them and we'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it didn't happen. So it's not quite as easy to do.
I don't doubt it.
I think. Anyway, moving on. So they there was some stuff about like tougher borrowing rules and various tax rises, and they wanted to. I think they wanted to build 300,000 houses per year, but it wasn't like this specific council houses. It was 300,000 houses per year.
I mean that is ambitious.
It's a lot of houses by any stretch.
I'm looking at the amount of houses that have ever been built a year. That is big.
But they don't have to.
I'm not saying
they don't have to do
it. But also, arguably the biggest reason that houses don't get built is planning rules. It's the planning system.
Yeah.
And so just saying, I'm going to build it. So what are you going to do? Where? On what land are you going to do this? I really have a problem. Excuse me. I really have a problem. But that's an understatement, isn't it, with these manifestos? The only problem I have with these manifestos, they don't look at actually how practical any of it is.
So there was one, and I didn't note it down. One of the manifestos mentioned something about making it easier to build on like brownfield sites and that kind of thing.
Right.
But again, I can't remember which manifesto it was.
It's more likely to be the Conservative one, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the Green one, is it?
No.
Shall we come on to the Greens? Or you still got some Lib Dem?
No, I was going to go Brexit first.
Okay.
I thought we'd save the worst to last. With the Greens.
So what did they? Do you know what they called this?
I can't remember. It did have a funny name.
It was like, was it the People's Contract?
I think it might have been something contract. So we'll just rip through these because it's not much. So there was no extension to the transition period.
Right.
Was a specific thing. They
hang on a minute. So they're saying. Hang on a minute. They're saying that they.
Well, they're kind of happy with the deal now.
Yeah.
That's the difference. It's not we're leaving without a deal. It's that if they have MPs, they will. I think presumably now they will vote.
They will vote for Boris's deal.
Yeah. Well, they'll certainly be allowed to. They won't be whipped to not vote for it. Because I think they're probably scared that they will ruin Brexit.
I think it's politically very savvy. Yeah.
Again, they're talking about no privatisation of the NHS. This is the Brexit Party manifesto. They're supposed to be a classical Liberal party. That's in their,
That's what their constitution says. Yeah.
But they're quite happy with the NHS.
National religion.
We're quite happy to nationalise an entire industry. It's not remotely classical Liberal.
A colleague of mine cut his finger with a knife while cutting through a bread roll 2 or 3 nights ago. You'll love this. The bread knife was like in the wash or whatever, so we got a normal knife. Exactly.
This wasn't serrated at all, and it was just
right down to the tendon. I saw the photograph. He sent me the photograph, and it's like a hole in here, and it's right in this knuckle bit in here, right down to the tendon. Horrific. That's like 8 o'clock at night. Do you know when it got stitched up? 2 stitches in it. 4:30 in the morning. That's how long. In fact, yes, it was Monday night.
Is that a particularly busy time for them?
Well, actually, when he quizzed the people there, and the staff there was some coppers there because obviously they some assault or whatever, and all of them said it isn't this busy on a Saturday or a Friday. We have no idea what this freak occurrence is. But yeah, that was.
Try not to pass out through lots of blood while we get to you.
What he said, he said, he works out and everything. He's a fit guy, and he was like, I'm not going to make them numb it up to sew it up. But then by the time he'd fallen asleep 3 times, and the adrenaline had gone, he's like, yeah, no, you need to numb this up now. Whereas like there and then, if it had been like, right, come on, do it, then it'll be fine. Maybe the world.
Yeah, so they want to reduce immigration. I don't remember them going into too specifics.
But let in all the refugees.
Brexit Party now. We've moved
Oh, sorry, we've moved on from there.
I know it's difficult because we're talking about the NHS. But
that's what threw me. That's what threw me.
Do you see what I mean? Even with the Brexit Party manifesto,
there's not a single. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful. So it's all about reducing immigration. They did talk about tax cuts,
but they didn't give a figure. They've not put a figure on it like the tens of thousands or anything. That was the mistake of Cameron and May.
I think they may have mentioned something like 50. They want to get down to 50,000 or something like that.
Okay.
It's quite a low number.
Okay. Net.
You're asking me this like I've got all these figures in my head, and I've got no idea.
That's fine.
They're talking about tax cuts. I think they were going to abolish VAT on fuel.
I mean, that's surely
which is that's good. They're going to. You'll like this one. They're going to ban the UK exporting waste.
Where's it going to go then?
Well, they'll just have to do what China does with our waste and burn
it. Let's turn it into carbon.
This is another one. Classical Liberal Party. Right. Okay.
Before you say this, surely this small Brexit Party manifesto is still better than all the others, in your opinion. Even with a bit of NHS stuff in there.
It is. It is.
Don't be too hard on them.
But it's still awful.
Okay, carry on.
And you will take part of that back after this, okay? Right, you'll love this. This is another specifically for you. Free broadband in deprived areas.
How's that going to work? Deprived area? What's a deprived area?
Who decides? Yeah, I know. And free Wi-Fi on public transport.
Right. Public transport.
There are a couple of good things in here. They're going to scrap the licence fee.
Absolutely. That's a biggie. That's a good one. I mean.
You like this one as well. So there are some good ones. This is something we can get behind. They're abolishing inheritance tax. I say they're going to do it. Yeah, they're not going to get in, but they want to abolish inheritance tax.
These are big things.
Scrap HS2.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is other than this kind of the socialist bits. This is more like.
But again, you can say that about all of them.
But this is more like a Conservative manifesto than the Conservatives.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, it's not though, is it? Because the Conservative manifesto would never have the complete repeal or abolition of any of the things that you're talking about.
Not these days, but this is like a.
But when would it ever?
So, in the 80s,
privatising something
in the 80s
is different from eliminating an entire tax.
Yeah, but so they slashed taxes in the 80s. Lawson would have
been.
Did
they eliminate any? Tax code just did this, didn't it? I'm not saying they didn't do good things, and I'm not saying they didn't do tax cutting things.
The top rate of tax went from like 83% to 40%. So
but they didn't say we're going to eliminate that tax.
But I think their tax cuts in the 80s would have had more effect than these, even though these sound like big things.
Right.
You know, inheritance tax isn't like income tax in terms of tax intake.
It will be under Labour. Have you seen what?
Yeah, it's going to.
They're dropping the threshold back down to
125, isn't it? Yeah.
So someone with, I've heard this stat. I haven't worked it out myself, but I saw it quoted, and it was a person who their only asset is their house, and they have the average house price will pay £44,000 out of the estate.
Crazy.
That's the average. So all this nonsense, and he's obviously been challenged on it, and he will continue to be challenged. All this nonsense about Corbyn saying, or the Labour Party saying, no one earning below £80,000.
Well, so technically he's right, because when you're dead, you're not earning,
Who pays the tax then? The mythical estate.
It's the estate, isn't it? Or is it taxed on? Okay, you might
Well,
be.
I mean, look, I've had to go through
I'm
this
not,
fairly
I'm not
recently,
sure.
but
You know, I'm not sure.
it is the estate, but obviously it effectively is that the money comes to the people unless
of course.
the beneficiaries,
Yeah.
unless it goes to the state. But
So they're going to abolish interest on student loans.
we're talking Brexit party again here, aren't we?
Yeah, Brexit. Yeah, I know. They're going to relax planning laws. It might have been the Brexit party that talked about making it easier to build brownfield sites and stuff. They've definitely got time, so they're going to liberalise that a little bit. And they want a US style Supreme Court.
What? As opposed to
so make it now that they've decided to make themselves political, they want to go the whole hog.
Oh, I see. As in appointees.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Rather than reverse the reforms.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Nothing on the Lords. Did any mention of the Lords in any of these, to your knowledge?
I don't remember seeing anything, but I did.
It's interesting.
Skim through them.
That's fine, but actually,
nothing jumped out.
I've not heard of anyone talk about Lords reform anymore.
Yeah, nothing jumped out.
Voting reform, other than this daft democracy commission or whatever.
Well, yeah.
Is the Lib Dems got? I mean, they used to have again. It was what were the Lib Dems known for? Penny on the pound for X and PR.
I think
Clegg lost that battle when he went for the AV referendum.
They may have mentioned. I know the Greens mentioned it.
Right,
but I don't remember the Lib Dems.
Okay, so is Greens the last one?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, if they're not going to get in, but if they ever got in approximately 10 years' time, it would be like Mad Max. You know, it'd be just like hell on earth.
Ironically,
Mad Max.
That's what they think, but that's right. They think that without the state, it becomes Mad Max. Yeah.
No, it becomes like Wakanda or whatever.
I agree, but Mad Max is used as an example of anarchy, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess it is.
So I think you just need to be careful. But I'm not saying you're wrong, but what people think of Lords, the Wild West. These are all the terms that are useful at the internet, the Wild West of the internet, and all this.
We'll be bankrupt and broke and going back to the Stone Age is what I was alluding to.
Yeah.
So 0 carbon by 2030, and they reckon
not far enough for Extinction Rebellion, is it?
They're going to spend 100 billion a year on this. 100 billion a year.
Are they going to create the money in the same way that Corbyn does?
Well, just make it up.
Government bonds.
That's not debt, you know. Okay, going back to that. So going back to that interview.
The Andrew Neil
for
our listener
with Corbyn. We can perhaps talk about this a little bit later. But there was one thing that I noticed immediately while watching it, and I've had nobody pick him up on it.
Well, okay.
Is when Andrew Neil was talking about the amount of tax that the top 5% pay.
Yeah.
And he asked Corbyn, and what he wanted was the percentage of how much do they pay. So for example, the top 1% pay.
But he deliberately answered it wrongly, didn't he?
Yeah, but did you hear his answer?
I can't remember it specifically.
So what Andrew Neil wanted was they pay half, pay about 50%.
Yeah.
What he said was he was giving the tax brackets.
Yes.
But he said,
but you get it wrong.
I think they pay 45 to 50%. Is it 45? And he got it. We didn't even know the high rate tax band.
Didn't even know high rate tax band. Yeah. It's crazy.
And nobody's picked him up on that. It's like, you want to be Prime Minister, you don't know what the top rate of tax is.
You want to tax the people at the top more. Very specifically, and you don't know what the current top rate of tax is.
But he didn't. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And obviously, the people in the top 5% are in different bands as well.
Yes.
You're obviously in the middle tier, which you and I are on. 40%, and then when you get to like 150 or whatever, you get to the 45. Yeah. But he seemed to think it was 45 to 50.
Yeah.
Anyway, so 0 carbon by 2030. They want to spend an additional $6 billion a year on the NHS, and specifically another $1 billion a year.
That's just the numbers are just
educating on higher education for nurses.
I made this point, didn't I, a couple of editions ago, that since the 39 billion divorce settlement fee. Again, I don't like using their language, but the money that we're going to pay the EU as a result of leaving with a deal is such a stupidly large amount of money that has been basically accepted now. That the bandying around of basically any billions is now,
yeah, potholes, a couple of billion
here, a couple of billion there. Yeah. Sooner or later, it's real money.
So carbon tax on fossil fuels.
On carbon, one would assume.
And they, it might not be like Mad Max, because there's going to be no petrol or diesel engines by 2030.
2030? They're going to do that in 10 years? Oh, it's just absurd.
Think of the
waste. You can't retrofit cars.
Waste.
Every car...
They want to plant 700 million trees by 2030 as well.
I actually think that's a great idea. I don't think it should be government mandated, but I would like everyone to plant more trees.
If people voluntarily want to plant trees, fine.
But I would actually be in favour of encouraging people to plant more trees, not through the tax system.
How do you do it?
Go out there and tell them, come on, you should plant more trees.
So you want the government to tell people to plant more trees?
I didn't say that.
Well, we're talking about manifestos here. I don't mind people planting trees voluntarily. I think a government mandating, or even a government...
I just said people, not
clear.
The people.
They should governments and states should steer clear of trees. Everyone should steer clear of trees when they're in the car, but they need to get out of the tree business. They're going to... Okay, you laugh at this. They want to tax meat and dairy.
Oh, yeah.
To combat methane.
Veganism. This is just rampant veganism.
But it's because of the methane. It's because of cows emitting greenhouse gases
by farting.
It's comical.
Where will they get the fertiliser for their organic produce?
They just won't need fertiliser. They haven't thought it through, have they?
Are you saying this falls apart under minimal scrutiny?
It's exactly what I'm saying. So they want to build 100,000 zero carbon homes, and they want to fix existing homes. I can't remember. It's so ridiculous. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. They must say a million bajillion, might they?
And they want to fix existing homes as well. So they want to spend lots of money on that. They want to scrap tuition fees.
Oh, okay, scrappy tuition fees. That's that. I was almost expecting that again from the Lib Dems, just to kind of rub it in a bit.
I think this is the Green Party rubbing it in. In fact, they may have said it in the Lib Dem manifesto as well.
And the Labour one. In fact, because that was something that they...
I think Labour may have said it.
Everything's free under Labour.
Universal basic income.
Right. Honestly, I thought that was going to be big.
86 billion.
And I thought one of that, 86 billion. I was thinking, because it's been a topic of conversation for a few years now, because UBI has a few different forms, doesn't it?
I mean, it can be better than our existing system.
Yes.
If implemented correctly, is possibly the best you could say about it.
Yes. In terms of being, it's like a flat tax.
Not as bad.
It's like a flat tax, isn't it? It's because of its simplicity. Then there are no loopholes and all that kind of stuff.
You should be able to get rid of swathes of employees.
Admins.
So the admin should go. So if it's implemented properly, it could be slightly less bad than what we have.
Yeah. Was there any nuclear disarmament in the Green one? I mean, did you just gloss over that kind of stuff? Because I was going to come on to the Coalition of Chaos stuff in a minute. And obviously the SNP and Trident.
Yeah, I didn't. So
I know you didn't do the SNP one.
I didn't do the SNP. The SNP did mention, and that was one of their red lines, was abolishing Trident.
But you see, they have a manifesto. Their manifesto isn't for government.
It's for slapping in front of Jeremy Corbyn and saying, you need to do this, this, this and this if you want to do a deal with us. That's all it's for.
But is it always that? Is it, not Jeremy Corbyn, but presumably they always have a manifesto for a general election, even though they are only fielding candidates in Scotland. So it is a slightly odd thing to do.
Yeah, it's just red lines for any potential negotiations.
Yeah,
that's all they're for. What can it be for?
Yeah, quite.
They're going to ban single-use plastics. completely? Straws, plastic bags, and all that.
Have you right? I'm not a frequent flyer of fast food, particularly, but
A frequent flyer of fast food.
yeah.
I've got visions of you launching hamburgers and hot dogs.
I don't go to your Macca D's and your Burger Kings particularly often, but when we came back, it's like when we came back, we went on some big long journey, we went on a 4-hour journey, and we stopped at McDonald's or something. And well, it wasn't McDonald's because we did the touchscreen, no employee stuff. We did the minimum wage avoiders.
Minimum wage in action.
Yeah.
If you go to all the European countries, of course, people serving it. It's quicker.
So we used the minimum wage avoiding screens.
The customisation is good on those though, because you can have. So I went for breakfast the other day. We kind of on a Friday at work we tend to go to McDonald's for breakfast.
Oh, okay. So you are a frequent flyer.
Well, once a week.
McMuffin.
And your double sausage egg muffins.
Yes.
Quite easy to turn to a triple sausage egg muffin. You can say, extra.
Because you go plus.
Extra cheese, and you can just keep adding to them.
It is good,
it's huge,
but it is also good for the fussy eater as well. Because you get to, without having to communicate to anyone, you can go and take off the lettuce, add the cheese, all that kind of stuff. But have you tried the straws? Have you actually tried one of their papery, cardboardy straws?
I think I had orange juice, so it came in a bottle.
They're awful.
Are they the big fat ones that just taste like paper?
Yes, and they do disintegrate.
Brilliant.
Not disintegrate in a biodegradable way. They make it so it's impossible to drink out of. So I had one. In fact, so the instance I was talking about
for an hour, or
the instance I was talking about, we were with the family, and my daughter had a drink, and we weren't there for a huge amount of time. I mean, the kids always take longer than we do, but we weren't there for a long time. And about halfway through, she couldn't drink out of the straw anymore because it starts collapsing.
Right.
Yeah. And then the different instance, and I'd forgotten about this, but I did a drive-through and got again, this is making me sound like I do this all the time. I had a hankering for a vanilla milkshake, and I hadn't had one in literally years.
Mr. Not a frequent
I
flyer.
But I haven't had a vanilla milkshake in years. And I was a bit worried that the sugar tax had kicked in and it had changed the formulation or something. So I was willing for this to be the first one in years and the last one ever. And I was on a long journey, work.
But you have to wait quite a while before you can even suck it up through the vanilla milkshakes, don't you?
This is the point. I couldn't drink it. By the time the milkshake was ready to be drunk, the straw was in a state where it wouldn't work anymore. And I was driving along and I can't drink my milkshake, and I'm there trying to take the lid off and scoop with the straw while trying to sip it while driving and not get milkshake everywhere. Ridiculous. I heard that while the plastic ones can actually be recycled, the cardboard ones can't, and there's something stupid about them.
I thought the plastic ones couldn't be recycled. Because I remember, I've got
whatever it is, they're useless.
I've got a friend of mine who runs a cocktail bar in the Canary Islands in Gran Canaria. He's a very well trained mixologist and cocktail waiter.
Is he like Tom Cruise on?
Oh, he's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And he kind of creates his own cocktails and stuff. But he kind of trained with some top guys in Germany and owns a cocktail bar. And it's amazing. But anyway, obviously, so he was trying to have different straws because he was struggling to get plastic straws now. So
yes.
I remember testing kind of different ones with him, and there was one specific type that we kind of settled on that didn't, it wasn't paper. It didn't alter the taste of the drink.
Yes.
Which lots of them can do, and it wasn't too bad. But they were like 50 or 60p each. So it's having to increase the price of the cocktails.
What were they made of?
It was some kind of biodegradable material. It looked like plastic,
like corn starch.
Yeah, it could have been something like that.
Yeah.
Not cheap at all, these things.
No, I don't doubt it. So no more straws.
No more straws. They're going to spend $4.5 billion a year on social care, $2.5 billion on cycle paths. Who will build the cycle paths? And they want to scrap first past the post and have some kind of PR.
Some kind of PR.
Imagine living. Imagine what life's. So we'd have to move to China or somewhere in 2030, where they're still driving cars. Can you imagine what it would be like?
With a proper engine.
Yeah.
Well, but right. So, Dave, you haven't really talked much about any specific energy policies, and I'm not criticising you for not being an expert.
I was losing the will to live by the time I got to the Green Party.
I'm sure you were. And I suppose, I mean, the point is, it's very easy to pick holes in all of these. What I was about to say was, where does the electricity come from? Because no one.
Well,
I mean, Lib Dems with that 80. Was it the Lib Dems with 80% renewables by 2030? What pie in the sky stuff. Incredibly impractical. We went for a drive to the coast a couple of weeks ago to a sea life centre. It's about an hour and a bit away. There are a number of wind farms on the way. This is Hunstanton, you know the road. And it was a perfectly clear day with no wind. Not a single turbine on any of these farms.
So they don't work when there's no wind. They don't work if there's too much wind because they catch fire.
Oh, I saw a video of that recently. With it kind of
goes too fast,
and one of the blades on fire, flying off, and insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a fact about wind farms that I've told to a few people, but I've always had the wrong response. So, if you wanted to create a wind farm that would create as much energy, I think I've probably told you.
No, you haven't. I'm just intrigued.
That would create as much energy as a single nuclear power station.
Oh, blimey.
Right.
Oh, blimey. Right.
That wind farm would have to cover the same area. Would have to cover Greater Manchester. And I've always told that to people, expecting them to go, "Wow," and everyone just goes, "Yeah, great idea."
Really?
Because of Greater Manchester.
Oh.
But that's the size. That's the size we're talking about. Yeah, what's wrong with that? It's Manchester. But
that's just one.
Yeah, so one nuclear power station.
And that's on the assumption that the wind is always blowing at exactly the right rate.
No, I think that
takes into account
what they when they currently work. But
right, okay, yeah, based on how effective they actually are. Crazy.
It's ludicrous, isn't it?
Crazy. Should we get a cup of tea before we carry on? I'm a bit past.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Should we pause the?
Probably should.
Okay, so we've just checked the time. We've been talking for an hour and 10 minutes about all this rubbish. So we decided not to have a cup of tea, and we're going to have some scotch. So this is some Balvenie Double Woodnick.
Nice.
Thank you for watching and for listening, and I think we're going to catch you all next time.
Thanks very much.